He always thought of himself as someone in control, a man whose life was built on deliberate choices and carefully chosen paths. Every success, every accolade, every moment of recognition had been the result of calculated decisions, hard work, and the ruthless ambition that had once defined his youth. Now, as he stood outside the polished glass doors of the elegant restaurant, the world buzzing around him felt familiar, even comforting. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, expecting nothing more than a quiet dinner before returning to his hotel room and the mountain of business calls waiting for him. The hostess greeted him with a practiced smile, offered a warm welcome, and led him to a corner booth where the menu promised exceptional cuisine and impeccable service. By the moment he looked up from the menu, everything in his carefully ordered world tilted. She was there, moving between tables with the same grace she once carried, as though the world around her was slightly softened at the edge. She was a waitress in this place, clad in a simple uniform, her hair tied back in a practical ponytail that swung with each step she took, carrying plates to the diners, her face solved by the glow of ambient light. There was something familiar about her, a curve of cheek, the shape of her eyes, something that stirred a whisper of memory in his mind. His breath caught before he even realized it, and his gaze held on her as though rooted to the spot. Something in her posture, the way she smiled politely at a customer's curt remark, struck him as profoundly real in a way his life rarely felt anymore. The nameplate on her uniform was small, inconspicuous. Just her first name. He couldn't quite place it at first, but the truth hit him like a jolt of cold lightning. It was her. The woman he had once loved with a youthful intensity he'd long convinced himself was foolish. The woman whose name had once been whispered in moments meant only for two people. And as his eyes traveled along the gentle slope of her cheek and the strength in the curve of her shoulders, he saw something he had never anticipated. She was pregnant, a roundness in her belly beneath her shirt, subtle yet undeniable, a testament to a chapter of life he had never known even existed. He froze, the menu falling unnoticed from his hands. A wave of memories washed through him, not the polished accomplishments that littered his mind, but the unguarded moments of youth, laughter, and promises spoken beneath starlit skies. In that heartbeat, all the carefully built walls of his present life cracked open, and he was transported back to a time when he believed love would conquer all. But love had not conquered. Instead, it had been replaced by convenience, ambition, and a choice he had made when fear outweighed devotion. He had walked away then, convinced that success and stability were worth the cost of a broken heart. At the time, he had justified it to himself with the logic of a young man untested by real life's consequences. She could rebuild, she was strong, and he had no desire to burden her with the complications he was not ready to face. But as the years had passed, as his wealth and status had grown, a quiet ache had settled in the deepest part of him. A lingering question that success could never answer. What if he had chosen differently? Now the answer stood before him. Moving among diners and taking orders with a calm professionalism that masked the thousand untold stories beneath her surface, he watched as she approached his table, unaware of his presence. Her eyes were focused on the task at hand, and for a moment she did not see him. But when she turned, her gaze swept over him and froze in return. Recognition flickered in her eyes, subtle yet undeniable, like a mirror reflecting a truth long buried. For a heartbeat they simply regarded each other in silence, his breath caught in his chest, hers steady yet uncertain. The years had changed them both, but the traces of that shared past were unmistakable. His voice came out rough when he finally spoke, his words tumbling out like a confession he had never intended to make. "Excuse me." She blinked, startled, and for a moment her professional mask slipped into something raw and real. Her eyes softened, uncertain, as though she was simultaneously tempted to flee and to stay rooted in the moment, just as he was. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steadier now. "I thought I wasn't expecting." His words trailed off, inadequate and flimsy in the face of so much unspoken history. She stood there, the faint curve of her belly beneath the uniform reminding him that life had marched forward without him. He had missed birthdays and early mornings and tears wiped away in the quiet dark of night. He had missed the gravest and greatest moments of her life. There was a story here, a deeply personal thread connecting them that neither time nor silence could erase. She took a breath, her expression composed yet vulnerably. She paused, as though choosing her words with care. Michael, the syllable fell like a weight dropped onto a polished stone floor, clear, resonant, and heavy. With the years between them, he nodded, the name on her lips curling around him like both accusation and remembrance. She set his dinner plate before him with a polite professionalism, a turkey club sandwich, something ordinary in contrast to the extraordinary emotional turmoil unfolding, yet her hands trembled ever so slightly. He watched her retreat, a swirl of emotions churning inside him, guilt, nostalgia, regret, and an ache that had no name yet. He knew in that moment that nothing in his life had prepared him for this collision with the past. Days passed like a slow unraveling of his own carefully constructed world. He found himself returning to that restaurant more than once, always hoping to see her again, to speak more than the rushed exchange that had left his heart pounding with unspoken emotion. She treated him with professionalism, but there was a flicker in her eyes each time their gazes met, something that spoke of memories unforgotten and emotions still settled deep beneath composed surfaces. He learned her name, Andrea, and she learned his affluence had only grown more formidable. But with that wealth came a solitude he had never anticipated, a realization that the bravado once necessary for success now felt hollow against the weight of unresolved truths. The reason he kept returning wasn't the coffee or the sandwiches, it was her. It was the quiet hum of possibility that lingered in the space between them, as fragile and unpredictable as a candle flame in a breeze. One afternoon, as Andrea cleared plates from nearby tables, he saw a young boy playing quietly in a corner booth, bright eyes, freckled cheeks, laughter unencumbered by adult restraint. The boy reminded him of nothing he had ever known and everything he had lost. She moved toward him, a protective smile on her face as she called the boy by name. When she looked his way again, the familiar flicker of recognition in her eyes was joined by something deeper, a sadness tempered by fierce love. He felt his heart break a little, because he knew that boy could very well be his own, a child born of a love he had forsaken years ago. The possibility sent a tremor through him, a hope and fear tangled so tightly that he didn't know which had the stronger hold. He watched her interact with the boy, the easy, familiar rhythms of maternal care woven into every gesture. He realized then that he had missed the richest pieces of life, not the accolades of business victories, but the laughter of a child, the simple joy of seeing someone you love smile without reservation. He didn't approach her that day. Instead, he left a generous tip and walked out into the fading light, his mind a storm of thoughts he had never allowed himself to feel. He thought of the choices he had made, the reasons he had believed they were right, and the profound cost of their outcomes. The world he had built was vast and magnificent, but it was incomplete in every way that truly mattered. Weeks passed, and then a letter arrived at his office, unexpected, handwritten, and unmistakably familiar. His name was on the envelope in a script that made his heart skip. Inside was a note, carefully written in Andrea's steady hand. It spoke of the boy, of the years that had passed, and of the daily courage it took to raise someone alone in a world that was often unkind. It spoke of dignity and strength, resilience born of hardship, and a quiet pride in the child who had grown into a thoughtful young boy with dreams as big as the sea. The last line of the note was simple, yet it hit him with the force of a truth he had long avoided. You don't have to hide from the past anymore. If you truly want to know us, come see us. His breath caught as he slid the letter back into the envelope, realizing that this moment, this simple invitation, was more powerful than any business deal he had ever closed. He stood up from his desk with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Life, unpredictable and ironic, had placed before him a chance to rewrite the regrets that had dogged him for years. But the question was no longer about whether he deserved a second chance. That was not the question at all. The deeper question was whether he had the courage to confront the consequences of his past choices and embrace the life that had grown without him. He arrived at the small home where Andrea lived, his steps hesitant yet resolute. The boy stood on the porch with Andrea beside him, a pair whose presence radiated a warmth and authenticity he had long forgotten existed in his world. The boy's eyes met his for a moment, curious and unguarded, and in that gaze he saw reflections of himself, and of something he had never allowed. Hymns, please like, share and subscribe. Lavera Sky, who shares stories the world need to feel again.